Hello, my name is Chris Delaney, and I'm the product owner for Law Enforcement Solutions at Esri. In this video, we'll be learning how to use the 80/20 analysis tool and the summarize incident count tool in the crime analysis solution for ArcGIS Pro to perform repeat location analysis. By addressing repeat problem locations for calls for service and crime, law enforcement agencies can focus their efforts more efficiently and apply strategic problem solving to have greater crime reduction impact and reduce workload and service demand. Let's take a look. So here we are in ArcGIS Pro. We have the crime analysis solution ribbon open. And the first tool that we're going to look at for repeat location analysis is called the 80/20 analysis tool. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of 80/20 analysis, also known as Pareto analysis, it's the idea that a relatively small number of locations disproportionately are responsible for a large number of events. So in our example, a small number of locations are responsible for a large number of calls for service. The 80/20 analysis tool in the crime analysis solution helps you identify those repeat problem locations and helps you understand what proportionately those frequent repeat problem locations, the amount that they account for relative to the total number of calls for service occurring across your jurisdiction. So let's start by, in the analysis tool section, we're going to click on the 80/20 analysis tool, and that's going to open up that tool in the geoprocessing pane. Our input for this is going to be the calls for service layer that you see in this map. There is an optional cluster tolerance. We're going to disregard this parameter right now. It's really for scenarios where you've got geocoding, unique issues in your data, where maybe you've got apartment complexes and you want to capture everything that is within 5 feet of one another because you have multiple points representing different apartments or something like that as one address. So this lets you group things together based on a distance. So if you had like a 5-foot tolerance that you wanted to put in there, you could do that. And the last parameter that we're going to enter in here is output fields. This will take and populate into the output analysis layer the first field that it finds for a particular location. This is particularly important for this tool because we want to be able to take the address of that location and persist it in the output. And this tool by default counts up by the same equivalent X and Y location, X and Y coordinate location of the points. And so we want to select your address field to ensure that the specific address associated with that X and Y location comes over into our output. So now we're going to run this tool. I'm going to turn off the input layer. And we have our output. As you can see, the output is a graduated symbology in equal interval counts. The largest incidents are shown, and they have 17 to 20 calls for service occurring at those locations. If I right-click on this layer and open up the attribute table, I can start to see what makes this tool particularly useful. As I dock my attribute table next to my map, I can see that the tool has automatically ordered all of the points in order according to the number of calls occurring at that location. I have the percent that this location accounts for, total percent of calls. So this top location has 20 calls for service. It accounts for 2% of all calls for service. And there's another field called cumulative percentage, which I'll explain in a moment, and the address, which is 776 South Route 59. Where this cumulative percentage starts to become important is if I go down to object ID number 20, so that'd be the 20th highest volume incident, I can see that the cumulative percentage is 25.05. And what that means is that cumulatively, these top 20 locations account for 25% of all calls for service. So all of 1 through 20 added up together add up to 25% of calls. Now, how do you get to that 80-20 number? Well, the way that you get to that is this 25 is really equivalent to kind of the numerator of the 80-20 equation. And the denominator is determined by dividing the number of incidents. So in this case, we've got the top 20 locations. You can see down here at the bottom of the attribute table, we have 553 unique locations in my data set. So 20 divided by 553 is approximately 3.6% of locations. So in our data, 3.6% of locations account for 25% of all calls. That is essentially 10% of all calls account for about 75%, or 10% of locations account for about 75% of all calls. So pretty close to that overall 80-20 number. And the use case here would be that you could then look at these top 20 locations, develop interventions for reducing call volumes, and have a very significant impact on your total calls for service workload for your department, freeing up your officers to do additional proactive crime reduction activities. The second tool I wanted to show is a slightly different take on repeat location analysis. It's often known as street segment analysis, and it relates to David Weisbord's law of crime concentration that says that crime generally tends to concentrate in micro places. And one way to think about micro places is in terms of street segments themselves. So the individual segments of streets between intersections, and being able to identify particular street segments that have repeat high volume problems and thus can be addressed proactively through strategic problem solving at that micro place level. So to do this, we're going to use the Summarize Incident Count tool. I have some arrest data for this example, and I have some streets. My input data here is going to be my streets. I want to sum the arrest data to the streets, so my input summary feature is the arrest data to the streets. Now, this tool works by snapping the points to the nearest street. But in order to do that, the tool needs to know how far to look to snap anything that's nearby. And so that's what this parameter search radius is all about. So to figure that out, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to some of my points. So I'll zoom into this one. I'm going to go to the map ribbon, and I'm going to take the measuring tool, and I'm going to measure the distance between the line and my point, and I can see that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 feet. So I'm going to call it 21 feet just to be safe. I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to enter in a search radius of 21 feet. And then optionally, I can add in a group field. So what this will do is count not only by the total number of arrests occurring at that street segment, but it will also do a unique count for each value found in a field that I list in this field. So I have a field called offense description. So that's the type of arrest that it was, the type of crime that was committed. And when I run this, it'll create a unique count for each crime type in that field. So I'm going to run this tool. And it returns this output. I'm going to turn off my arrests. You can see that I have 5 categories here, and they are graduated color. If I right-click on this output layer and click Symbology, you can see that by default, this is grouped by natural breaks. You could choose to break it into something else, equal interval or quantile. The real purpose of this particular analysis is to identify the problem repeat locations. So what I generally tend to do, whichever classification you prefer, I tend to hide with no color the streets that, and I'm going to turn my underlying street layer off, that are relatively low volume. So I'm probably going to hide the bottom couple. And now I have my repeat problem locations that I can focus on for analysis. And when I open up the attribute table here, I can see that in my data, I not only have the the total count, I'm going to sort descending. I have a unique count for each offense type, so I can see the specific types of offenses occurring in that particular location. So this is another way to look at repeat locations, but this time through the lens of street segments instead of specific discrete locations. So this has been looking at the 80/20 analysis tool and the summarize incident count tool to identify repeat problem locations using the crime analysis solution. My name is Chris Delaney, product owner for Law Enforcement Solutions. Thanks again for watching and hope to see you on another video.